Welcome to Obscured Reality with Mark and Stephanie. From UFO sightings to the lost city of Atlantis, from alien encounters to the living dead, each episode will leave you questioning reality. If you're ready to explore the eerie, tune in to Obscured Reality, where mysteries come alive.
Welcome back, Obscured Reality. Mark and Stephanie, we're back. Tonight, special show. We mentioned it on a previous episode. We have a special guest tonight. Let's start out with his bio here. This gentleman was born in Washington, D.C. His father was an agent training with the FBI at Quantico. Now, obviously, we're not interviewing his father, right? But it's all important, I think, the background. He spent 29 years as a special agent with the FBI and retired as a supervisor, the father. Our guest was an honor student at Winfield High School, went to Marshall University on a football scholarship, and graduated with honors. He was hired in 1996 with the Knoxville Police Department in Tennessee. In 2006, he left the police department to join the military and law enforcement officers in Iraq. Spent 3 years advising, teaching, and conducting missions in the hunt for Al-Qaeda and insurgent groups from 2007 to 2009. He was then catastrophically wounded after kicking in a door that was booby-trapped, spent 10 years recovering from numerous surgeries. So he then medically retired in 2018. Lastly, he began researching or investigating several topics involving extraordinary claims such as Bigfoot, UFOs, Skinwalker Ranch. You guys have all heard of those in college. And he also authored academic papers on the Annalise Michel and the fraudulent claim of possession from her family and the leaders in the Catholic Church. He's an independent freelance research specialist and the president, CEO of Herd Brothers, which is the official Marshall University Football Alumni Association. So please welcome Jared Turner to the show. Jared, how's it going?
Great. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. It means a lot, and it's an honor to be on your show.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah. Impressive bio.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually I had some more stuff that didn't apply to any of this, and so I tried to cut it down. But I have training, and I have experience, and I have the background. So that's the main thing I wanted to get across to you.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. And you can see from the beginning, starting with your father, definitely is at least starting to run in the family, if not ran in the family prior, which is good because you're probably being parented with somewhat of that mindset, whether intentionally or not, probably unintentionally, but it's there, and a lot of people have that, whether it's just genetically in them, that's how they are, or they're parented, training, things like that. Would you mind expanding on the issues in Iraq? I'm very curious. I do have a friend. He was out there. He was in the Navy. Actually, I had him on the show a while back, talking to him about some things. Nothing came of it. He hasn't seen anything crazy, which was my expectation. But so, I think that's everyone's fear out there if they're going into battle.
Yeah.
What happened to you?
So what happened to me was it wasn't unique to the time period. If we go back to 2007, we're losing 155 soldiers, troops a month due to IEDs and EFPs that have been brought in from Iran. And this whole thing, the whole civil war thing over there that started with Zarqawi just took on a mind of its own and a life of its own. And but that said, my main job was to take the Iraqi SWAT team and with our special forces and special ops guys, go out and teach them how to conduct raids and missions from a law enforcement standpoint. Now, we've installed a democratic government there, a democracy, which means we have democratic policing principles. So no longer is it okay to go in somebody's house, take their VCR because you're the police, which is how they've always operated. So it was a trying to get them to understand why they have to trust and why the public needs to trust them was a battle that a lot of people think there are generations, because a lot of these guys have never operated like this before. That said, we worked about half the time. There might have been one Iraqi with me. I spoke Arabic, so half the time I spent out on my own. So I was in Samarra for a year and a half, which is just north of Baghdad. It's about an hour and a half north of Baghdad. And then from Samarra, I went to Tikrit, which is Saddam's hometown, for another year and a half. And total is 3 years and some. But during this time, towards the end, what happened to me specifically? Now, we were hit with IEDs over the course of my years there, gunfights. I don't know how many raids. It had some nights we did 4 and 5 raids a night. We got to that op tempo point. And to make a long story short, in 2009, we started what they call a new SOFA agreement, a status of forces agreement. So that's just our role in Iraq. And by this time, we're doing reconstruction. We're rebuilding everything. And then some. We're dropping $14 billion a month over there, and just building their infrastructure. And we turned over all of the prisoners that we had captured when we first got there to the Iraqis. And in Tikrit specifically, they had 16 individuals in late October or late September that were turned over, and they were all Al-Qaeda. The minute they got into jail, that night they were gone. So they either bribed their way or threatened their way out, but they left. And in doing so, we converged on all the villages around Qadisiyah, everything around Tikrit, and we just started going through it, kicking in doors. And what happened to me specifically was we went to a house, and we had the patriarch, the father, come out and explain to him what we need to do. And I'm talking to him in Arabic. And I told him we weren't going to touch any of his females. We just wanted to make sure there wasn't any bad guys held up in his house.
No more spoils war, guys.
Yeah, spoils war. So we went through there, came out. I shook his hand, told him I was sorry, and I appreciated it. And he had this look, and he was like, "Why?" He expected me to strong arm him, I guess, like he was used to. But because I was professional to him, because I was kind, it came back to help me. But he shook my hand. He kissed me on the cheek, told me I was welcome in his village and with his family anytime I wanted to come back, which meant a lot to me. We go a block down, kick in a door, and it's booby trapped, and it kills the guys that are with me. It buries me under the rubble. This individual with his sons came over and dug us out and was holding my weapons when the medic came around the corner, because our team was split up. So we were trying to cover as much ground as possible. But the Iraqi commando and the other 2 Iraqis that were with me, it decapitated them. Yeah. And so they dug me out of the rubble. They revived me. He was standing there protecting me. From what I understand, they gave him an award afterwards. But I don't remember any of this. I know that I kicked in the door and I saw the command wire come up, and it felt like a train hit me in the back of the head in a flash, and I woke up in ICU.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to remember much of that.
Yeah, especially for me being somewhat claustrophobic. At least I am now after being buried. It blew me off the porch. It blew the whole house down on us. And but that said, they stabilized me over the next month, and then flew me to Germany, and then to Walter Reed, and then to my home, which had gone from Knoxville to Huntington. So they flew me back to West Virginia, and 10 years worth of surgeries. It broke my neck, blew out my teeth. So I got implants put in. It gave me a brain injury, left ear, left eye, collarbone, shoulder, fractures on my face. And so, but all that said, the only thing that I suffer at this point, 12 years removed, is the survivor's guilt, because we lost so many teammates over there that and then I get home and start losing all my family to cancer or to health issues, and it got to be so much that I detached. And But in doing so, I fell back into to wanting to finish my educational doctorate and started researching some things and looking at some papers and got into.
So I think you're going to get right into segue into the next part here, which is your investigative background, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned in the bio Bigfoot, UFO, Skinwalker, obviously Annalise. I know a little bit about that case, but yeah, why don't you continue into how'd you get into not necessarily investigative work. I think that's kind of self-explanatory here with probably police department and all that. But if there's more to it, let us know. But mainly into these types of things, such as Annalise Michelle, Bigfoot, UFO, Skinwalker Ranch. Obviously, what a lot of people would consider woo topics.
Yeah.
What got you into spending your time and resources into looking into these things, and how do you do that?
Growing up, my father, he grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and he went to college to play basketball on scholarship, and he got his degree in engineering and worked on the strip mines and coal mines in Kentucky prior to graduating and going to the FBI, or graduating from college and going to the FBI. So all our family, everybody was in the mines, in the strip mines, and so we would go out there and ride three-wheelers. Kind of dates me, tells you how long ago that was, but we would ride our three-wheelers in camp, and
dangerous ones.
Yeah, and back in the 70s, after seeing the $6 Million Man fight Bigfoot and seeing other shows with Leonard Nimoy, we would go out, and Dad would convince me that we were right on the trail of Bigfoot. Now, I was 8, 9 years old.
Now, did he believe it, or was it just you're a kid? He just messed with you.
It was like I told you about, like how I do with my dog. What's that? And he turns and looks. Or if we're in Iraq, you go to the Iraqis, you're like, what's that?
To my dog.
Yeah. And then they turn around and start shooting. And so he would do that and convince us, and then like even wake us up at night out of the tent and be like, there's somebody out there. And I was sold on it. Now, as I started to mature and as I started to get educated, I understood that there was something not right about a lot of this. And I wanted so badly, and still do, I want so badly to believe that Bigfoot is actually a real walking, living creature, something that you can see. Yeah. And it's the kid in me. And then but as that grew into the UFOs and into hearing stories and understanding how people psychologically will embellish, if you will. Some people, we have police officers that will lie on the stand. We have people that lie in depositions, attorneys, everybody, and they'll a lot of times they'll go from not really meaning it in a bad way to now they're invested in the lie. And
we hear a lot of this with interviews with people who've it could be a law enforcement officer, like you mentioned. I just saw a video the other night on YouTube of an officer that got in a shooting real quick. The guy clearly had a shotgun, whatever. And this guy was more of a rookie, and he obviously didn't want this to happen, but he wound up having to get the guy. And afterwards, for quite some time, he's just shaky. You can tell by his voice how he's talking. He's nervous. And that's one of the things with a lot of interviews with police, at least that I've heard, is when things like this happen, something that could be considered maybe a traumatic event.
That's a good point.
What your version, your memory of what really happened isn't quite exactly what happened, and then over time, as you calm down, days go by, you may start filling in the blanks and not intentionally lying, but falsely filling those blanks in.
It actually is really common for people to like every time they recall a memory to recall it incorrectly. That's a thing. Like every time you pull up a memory, you're remembering it wrong.
And that also applies to eyewitness testimony. That's some of the most inconsistent testimony we have. But that's also why most agencies have a policy. If you have an officer get into a shooting, when the supervisor arrives, and I was a supervisor, when we arrive, first thing we do is get the officer. We put him in the vehicle, tell him to shut up. He doesn't say a thing. Yeah. Let him calm down. See if he needs anything, ambulance, any treatment. Let him call his family, let him call his FOP or PBA attorney, and go from there. And we don't encourage him to talk, because whatever he says, it's not going to be accurate. And I see the same things with what I just watched the episode from a couple of days ago about somebody seeing something, and they told the story that they saw it in the tree. It turns out they didn't see it in the tree, or they saw something in the bushes, and they filled in the blanks in their head that this was, and so that's a common thing. And it like we spoke about the orbs, and we spoke about all these, just because people see satellites in the sky through night vision doesn't mean that we have an alien invasion coming. And until I've just gotten to the point, and this is just maturity, I think, and being frustrated. But like I told you, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof and extraordinary evidence. And anytime you research or you get a claim or you get evidence of something, when you really start looking into it, there's a lot of room for speculation. There's a lot of room for misidentification, for other things, and you would think with all the technology we have nowadays that we would be able to find something better than that with the trail cams, with the drones, with the satellites. And so it frustrated me to the point where when I started researching some of this stuff, and it began with so if I go back, it began with Annalise Michel, and that's a sad tragedy that should have never happened. And the problem is that you get on YouTube and you hear these voices and you hear these recordings and you hear a story, and it's a short 7-minute video, and they don't take time to read the case and to look at actually what happened and find out that this thing. And so in doing that,
it's for the clicks.
When someone's putting tons of video and pictures with it, even that probably aren't even related to it, just something to keep you visually attracted.
That part,
and bigger problem. And we're going to touch way more on this stuff. This is more, kind of the opening on how you got into this. But now with AI, there's people out there making the funniest stuff on TikTok. Stormtroopers. Vader just sent us to Earth, and Greg here, they're dressed up in full, stormtrooper uniforms. He's like, he sent us to Mexico, and Greg says this is kind of like Tatooine. He loves this place. It's all 100% fake. You're just typing in a basic script, telling it what you want, and poof, now you got 20,000 followers on TikTok.
So
my son told. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Stephanie.
It's all right. Quick question. So you said that you grew up in Eastern Kentucky. So is that like Appalachia area or?
Oh yeah.
Oh, so did you grow up with the whole "you don't whistle at night if you hear your name"? No, you didn't. Type.
No. And so let me expand on that a little bit, and I'll tie this into something that Mark and I spoke about when we talked a week ago. I hear some of these guys and some of these stories, and some of these, I don't want to swear if I'm not. I'm trying to be professional.
I'm not. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some of these people are, and some of these people, Dr. Stephen Greer is batshit crazy. Some of these other people come out and they're nuts.
You went straight to the deep end.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just after you and I talked, I watched other things, and then like you asked me to, I asked my dad. And he's, if there was anything that he knew that was classified at this point in his life, he's not going to write a book on it. But the fact is that there's things over and a lot of what got me interested in things was being able to fact check with him. Hey, did this really happen, or did it happen this way? And
it's good you have a resource.
Yeah, and he was able to tell me as best he knew. So I asked him about what we spoke about Stephen Greer, and he looked at me and just didn't blink, stared at me like, son, at this point in your life, have you not learned anything? Are you that stupid? And because he you know, in the past we've talked about a lot of this, and I asked him, hey Dad, what do you get when you watch Bob Lazar? What do you get when you read him? And he says, well, I can't read him because that Jeremy Corbell is always jumping in and steering the ship, and so
there's previous interviews that are way better without that guy.
Yeah, well, and even I watched the Joe Rogan one, and even that. But when you find out, it's disappointing when you get a story, and it's a spectacular story, and then you start to find out that, wait a minute, the story that's being told is not. I mean, there was a movie with the plot and with the individual that died prior to this, and there's so many red flags that, and I do know this. If I had asked my dad something I asked my former father-in-law, who has spent every day of his life hunting in the backwoods of West Virginia. And I'm talking about Greenbrier and Pocahontas County and down in the southern part of West Virginia where West Virginians don't go. And I asked him, have you ever heard anything, seen anything? Tell me something about, and he looked at me same way. He's like, no. And he explained to me the if you've ever heard a deer in rut or an elk that's starting to bugle and other things, that he said it's just but it doesn't mean that there's a creature coming after you. And so, Dad, all our time, everybody that I asked, and of course, I don't, which is why I have a problem with people who anybody that, like we said, and I don't mean, I know I'm jumping around here, but anytime we get a claim from Central or South America, they're going to have to bring the evidence to my front door and show it to me and introduce me to the alien, because I don't believe, it's just a culture thing, I think. And you can show them that it's fake and they still will not believe it. And the same thing is with like the Matt Moneymaker. He's an attorney. He's a lawyer. He went to law school. But he also speaks about Bigfoot and the others as if it's a factual thing, as if Bigfoot, they speak out as if there's been research done and Bigfoots are known to do this, and so and it's and people that don't understand that, and so rather than going on a crusade of trying to correct any of this, I knew I was fighting, because most of the people that watch this is just for the entertainment. I don't think half the people believe it, and whether it's UFOs or I have a different take on the UFOs. I don't, I can give you the standard line that I don't think we're alone, and I don't think, but I also know that until there's something produced, until there's something comes out, that again, the extraordinary claims and that's what I taught. I lived my life with two principles, and my law professors taught me this, and best advice I've ever been given. And it was the extraordinary claims part I had already known, but he also said we live in a world of probabilities, not possibilities. And if you operate in possibilities, I mean, just about anything's possible. I could get struck by lightning right now, but I'm 99.9% not going to. It's not raining. I'm inside. And so, however, walking outside and then getting hit by a vehicle, if I'm trying to cross the road, is more probable. And so, and that's how we operate in law enforcement. That's how we do in sports when we're game planning against an opponent. That's why we watch film, so we know when they line up in this situation at this point on the field at this time at this down and distance what they're going to run if they do this and this, because we've gone over it so many times. And so that's the probabilities have gone up, and the possibility of a lot of this stuff is just astronomically. And so that's where I started trying to do some official research on it, not knowing where to go with it. But fortunately, I had done I had authored the papers on Annalise Michel, and so that's about the time that I picked up your website and watched your alls and watched the Sierra Sounds. And I can honestly say that, and I also told you this, and I don't mean to. I really need to let you guys talk and I need to listen. But I tend to give law enforcement and military personnel the benefit of the doubt, not so much I tend to back off and not go in on them. And which is why I don't say much about David Paulides, but I'm really disappointed in David Paulides because, yeah. And I'm also, there's been a lot of things that I've looked at, and I've just, I've shook my head and stayed away from it because it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to, unless it's, that Annalise Michelle thing was a different situation. But the way they project it now, if you interview most of the people who've watched a 7-minute video on YouTube, even John Allen, Mr. Ballin, he'll tell you he's just a storyteller. He's not, but he puts a story, and then it goes viral, and people think that this really happened. Yeah. And then you find out, you look into it, and you find out that, wait a minute, this isn't. There's so much. It would take its own episode for me to explain to you the bullshit that went into and the fraud that went with the Catholic Church, and not so much which is why they immediately reversed. But it was it's sad that it happened. That was something that I did that was official, and so again, I could put the challenge out there that Stephen Greer, you want to show me something? Don't show me anything that's classified. Lue Elizondo, you want to show me something? Don't lie to me and show me a picture that is not true. If you guys want to do something, don't take me down to South Florida and have me turn my back and shoot flares in the sky and tell me it's a UFO. Show me something that will make me say, and I will say, you know what? I want to be wrong about some of this stuff. I truly do, but it's just not. It's just not. Yeah. It's not reality.
Well, I think that goes. Yeah. So I think we got a good idea of how you got into this. It looks like probably stems from childhood. Your dad kind of screwing with you, but that probably helped over the years kind of knock some of the fear about being scared about things out of you, which is good, and probably gave you an interest in some of these topics, it sounds like. And then obviously law enforcement work and all that stuff, you get into the investigation side of things, and it sounds like that really interests you. And it sounds like these topics have probably interested you for a long time. They have for me as well. Back from, same time as you, back when I was a kid, but it was more of, hey, we're going camping for 2 weeks out in the Sierras. So I'm getting, at the time with the fake little newspaper magazine you could get where it might show like Oprah on the front cover with an alien coming out of her tummy.
That's it. Yeah. Star, National Enquirer.
It was purely entertainment. I believe nothing. It was just entertainment while I was on the trip up there and back. And, it wasn't. I would, at time to time back in the day when I had time at work, once I finally was, had a job, I was sitting at a computer all day. When I was bored and didn't have much to do, I'd look up some of these stories. And here's the thing with me. Okay. I've read a lot of these stories, mainly having to do with, UFOs, which is nothing more than unidentified objects. But people always relate it to aliens and flying saucers, UFOs, alien abductions, those types of things, a little bit in the paranormal side. And a lot of the stories I would read, it was just entertainment value. However, there was ones you could tell, and not that I was looking for truth in any of them, but there was ones you could tell in the first 1 to 2 sentences, boom, 100% complete bullshit. And I would not even touch most of those because the bullshit aspect about it had zero interest for me. And it wasn't until I came across Bob Lazar's story, and this had to be at least 15 years ago or so, and this is something we'll go into in a little bit, but it wasn't until I came across his story I was like, wow, this is interesting, and we'll go into a little later, why I think that has some staying power with just people in general, and I'm like, that's a really interesting story. And it got me looking more into pretty much anything and everything I could find on Bob Lazar and all this stuff. And from spending that amount of time looking into it, I mean, I've wound up coming up with my own theories, one or two on this. And I literally just heard someone the other day talking about Lazar, and it was very brief though. And one of the theories he's mentioned is right along the lines of one of the ones I have, and I really think it has something to play, with this. But his story is what kept me going even more in it and taking it a little more seriously. However, knowing, full well knowing most of it's probably BS. But, ultimately people have experiences.
Absolutely. And just because I make the comment that that there's red flags, that doesn't, it, just because he's had problems outside of that and he had other things doesn't mean that some of this stuff isn't true or there's not truth behind it. And so I want to, again, I'm being practical. I'm not trying to be skeptical and trying to ruin somebody and trying to debate people, although I don't mind to do that. I just don't, I don't want to take away somebody's belief system or something that somebody believes hard in. And I just have a problem with the way some things are told, like what Ron Moorhead said. Immediately, I hear that. And immediately, the first thing that comes to mind is everything that it would take logistically to get tape recorders, microphones, all this stuff up there. The fact that, and
at that point in time,
and at that point in time, we're talking about 1974, which is what he said was the first recording. And I had a chance to see him at a symposium or a Bigfoot seminar that I'm not ashamed to say I went to, hoping.
I wouldn't mind going to one.
Yeah, and I asked him specifically, and I did it in a nice way. What kind of recording equipment? What kind? And of course, he changed the subject. He put it off on Alberry. But if you listen to it, that they're talking into a microphone, and the others sound like they're talking into a microphone.
Yep,
and if they're 100%. How many times are you climbing up in this tree to change these tapes and these reel-to-reel tapes? And if they're cassette tapes, batteries
you're taking for fact that they actually put them way up in trees.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's a good point.
You believe none of the rest of it. Yeah, as I don't either.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. And
it's really funny because I see a lot of people do that.
Well, I mean, I listen to it and then it goes from one thing to it is such, it's one of those things that it's not like they took some liberties with something that might or might not have happened. I mean, they went full, they went the full Monty on it, and they went so far out there and he's to the point where in his life he's successful, and I don't think he cares whether anybody believes him or not. But when you wait so long to sell these and to make sure that nobody else is around to tell the story about what really happened, that it didn't happen, and you start dialing it back, and this is the investigator in me that says, wait a minute, hold on a second, here, stop. And I've done this with other people that I've talked to. I told you I got the people at the Sasquatch channel upset with me because I challenged an individual on there he was storytelling is what he was doing. He was more concerned with telling the story and speaking to the audience and being theatrical and dramatic than he was being accurate. And in doing so, he said some things that could no way impossible have happened, as far as the type of optic he was using and the distance and what he heard and saw and smelled. And so when I called him out on it, I was no longer, and I also explained to them that this whole Afghan giant thing was a made up story.
Satanic Panic just popped up in the middle of the screen there for me. I mean, not to cut you off, but that just totally reminded me. Satanic Panic. I mean, everything you're saying, it's all about education on how to actually live life, how to look at things realistically. I've been wanting to say that for a minute now since you've been talking, because that's like right along the line where you first went. Satanic Panic happened so far back, and was there really anything to it? No. And it's just education, how to look at it. And you look at those things, you're seeing being portrayed, and you go outside and walk around and you see none of it.
Mm-hmm.
There should be some red flags there,
Yeah, that's what the individual. There was an individual, Todd Standing, in British Columbia, who took the pictures of the. Who he claims that he's the one that takes people out to have interactions with Bigfoot. Turns out he doesn't take people out to have interactions with Bigfoot. Turns out it's a claim, and it turns out that a lot of this is, and so a lot of it is just, I think most people, when they practically look at it, and I'm not saying that I've not had experiences. Listen, when I went to Gettysburg, it's a different feeling there, and the hair stood up, and I could feel something. It just felt different. When I was in Iraq, at a certain place, it felt different. There was something that I felt like was looking at me, staring at me, and with a number of
oh my gosh
of deaths that occurred there.
I've actually wanted to ask you that. Have you since you were over there and with everything that you witnessed, did you witness any type of paranormal activity, or I don't know, because I have read a lot of stories about soldiers over there seeing things while they're on watch late at night. So
yep,
I was just gonna.
And that was big in Afghanistan. There was a Marine unit that had some experiences, so they said. And then, so what you when you look into it, you would look in to find out if there was really an actual Marine unit that had the experiences, or if somebody's claiming that happened. And so there was a story about Mount St. Helens when it erupted. So I was it was 1980 but there was a story that the military had to rescue a couple burned creatures that this one Native American took. But anytime they tie it to the military, or they tie it to pilots, or they, with UFOs, or they tie it to law enforcement, it's supposed to lend credibility. Thank you. And it's just not a true story. And it just doesn't happen. And it didn't happen. And I mean, you can't take two people at Taco Bell and tell them a secret and have them keep that secret.
It's real meat.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Yes, it
is. But no, to answer your question, in Iraq, it wasn't something that I didn't, I didn't have any interaction. I didn't have anything scratch me or see anything. What I did have was there's this. I think it's the second oldest Christian church on earth that is on. It's in Tikrit, and Saddam had buried it and built a mosque over it. And then when we bombed and when we destroyed it revealed the Christian church. And being there where they claim is the Garden of Eden and the birth of Abraham, and there's a different, and maybe I'm sure a lot of it was psychological for me. But as far as having any experiences, when I was at Gettysburg, that was the first time in my life that I reached to make sure I had my weapon on me. And I'm thinking to myself, somebody, it's just, you get this overwhelming dread. And it's probably my mind thinking, okay, that's not a natural feeling. And so I need to be on edge. And then one thing leads to another. And next thing I know, I think I'm seeing stuff that I'm not actually seeing, but the feeling is there. And so that's pretty much the extent of everything else that I've experienced is explainable, and I think that's the same way for most people. But I don't discount them because, I know that's and I don't, again, whether it's Bigfoot or whether it's a UFO or whether it's a paranormal type. Now, I won't watch Ghost Hunters. I mean, that is the quintessence. I know they don't believe it. I know for a fact that Zach doesn't believe what I think he wants to believe it, but I know they know that's BS, and they have had a 20-year run at it. And they go out and they hear something. And
so much dirt about that.
Do you really?
Show. Oh yes. Oh, I know so much fucking dirt on that shit.
Let's do this. I want to get into that. Because all three of us are going to have thoughts, opinions, things like that. I think we'll probably be mostly on the same page on a lot of things here.
Yeah.
So let's actually jump into it. For the people out there watching, we'll go over quite a few different things. You've already kind of got it from, his bio and some of the things we talked about. I have specific people because of stories and things that, I want to talk about. But it's all to get, my outlook on tonight's show, and also keep in mind this is probably going to be a longer show. So if we need to stop, I know, Stephanie's a couple hours ahead as well. I know you, Jared, a little more open with the time frame tonight. I
Yeah,
think you had
I'm good.
mentioned Stephanie not so much. She's got to work in the morning. So if we need to, we can always do a follow up episode as well, as long as
Absolutely.
that's okay with you, Jared.
Honestly, if like we could end an episode and I can jump out and y'all could do the second half of that episode,
Yeah, either way.
like, because it's not that hard to fake an ending, pause, so that you know where that is, audio wise, and then
either way is totally fine.
like, I mean, because you guys could, I mean, especially if you two don't have like any type of like time restrictions.
I don't have anything. Yeah, I'm good. It's I'm good.
Yeah.
Either you guys could talk all night if you want. Fuck.
Either way totally works. But we're gonna go into Bigfoot. We're gonna go into UFOs. Skinwalker Ranch I really want to talk about as well. Probably Annalise Michelle as well. I'm not too versed on that. I do have that up. I was reading a little bit on that earlier as well. I'd read some on that last week also. But one of the things one of the goals I'm looking at here is to get your perspective, Jared, on, from not just an investigative background, but an investigative background within these particular topics. Because I think education is the most important thing when it comes to all of this. And, I think there's a weird psychology going on with people nowadays that's been building up to a point. It's been bubbling. And I really think we have been getting to a point where a lot of people are sick of just the humdrum everyday routine, and it really feels like people are just looking for more. And that doesn't mean they're below letting their belief system wander off just because it might make their life more interesting. Now, I could be 100% wrong, but I really think there's something to it. I don't know, but let's get into the topic.
Agree with that.
I want to hear where you're at with these, and maybe we'll just start with Lazar, Bob Lazar. Now, I mentioned his case. This is what's always struck me with him, not necessarily him, but his story. His case has always stuck with me. It has some type of holding power where it stays. Now, we take Jeremy Corbell out of that equation because he's helped bring it back with his documentary on Bob Lazar, which I liked, by the way.
Right, I did too. I saw that,
Yeah, it didn't tell us anything new. However, I don't like how Corbell did part of that documentary, because he led on to some things that he never finished in the documentary, and it's just not an honest way of doing it, I don't think. So Lazar, we all know, he claimed to have worked out at a site called S4, 15 miles southwest of Area 51. This location is at Papoose Lake.
Papoose.
9 UFOs or saucer-shaped or alien craft in 9 hangars built into the mountainside, 45-degree angle, camouflage to look like the surrounding area, blah, 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 all that BS. We all know all that. Now, we're not going to go into the full stories. No need to waste time on that. I think the three of us pretty much know. Stephanie, you've heard a lot of it from me. Here's where I go, and then I want to know, from what you've looked into at least, and just what you think, Jared, what you think about this, as well as what you think about his case and why it's there, because I have a hard time seeing someone hold on to this for that long. Now, when I really began looking into this, and there's just no way this is true, I started seeing a lot about John Lear. Now, John Lear is the son of, I think his name was Bill Lear, Bill or Bob Lear, the inventor of the Learjet.
Yep.
John Lear at the time was friends with Bob Lazar. Now, this whole thing came about allegedly because allegedly Bob Lazar was every time we do a show and words just escape my brain, physicist, right?
Yeah. That's what he claimed. He's a smart individual.
Oh, very smart.
Yeah. So, and
his claim
didn't George Knapp facilitate that meeting with
100%. I'm getting right there too, because I think that plays a role, and not necessarily George Knapp, but so Bob Lazar is friends with John Lear at the time, because Bob was an alleged physicist. The story goes that John Lear kind of knew people, and got Bob in contact with someone who allegedly worked out at either Area 51 or S4, because he thought he'd be a good fit for these programs. I don't know how John Lear knew anything about them. Maybe he allegedly didn't, but some of the stuff they do. He got him in contact, and the story goes he got the interview, did follow up, blah blah blah. They hire him, although this was only for a few months, and that was it. And he wasn't really even out there that often, according to him. Mm-hmm. He gets the job. He goes out there. He sees the weird stuff. We hear him talk about, the introduction packet, the briefing packet, when he started, how it's saying, you're going to be working on this stuff. These craft come from aliens who come from from Zeta Reticuli, blah, 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 which we're going to go into all that too. And Bob Lazar has said, I didn't take anything from those. I don't know if I can believe them. I could totally see them putting them out for misinformation. You think about a location like Zeta Reticuli. How would that come about as putting it out there, to see who's talking? Well, you give the same story to anyone that gets hired out there. You tell Bob they're from Zeta Reticuli. You tell the next guy they're from Mars. You tell the next guy they're from Pluto. And that way, if anything leaks, they're going to include that in there.
Yep.
And that's how you can, you trace it back. I see that part of his story is simply, the whole, here's the briefing info. I really took none of that to heart because it just sounds too extraordinary. Even after seeing what I saw, I don't believe those documents. I believe what I could put my hands on. I see that simply as nothing more than trying to insert truth into a story to make it more believable. And yep.
You guys have either done your research to an extreme amount, or you both work for an intelligence agency, because this you're exactly you're telling exactly what so if we there's a lot of times where people will and the government does this all the time. It's a way of checks and balances, but to show somebody something, or to leak something to somebody that's not actually a true it's something that it's a way of controlling somebody, and it's a way of also tracking something. And I always felt like if he worked somewhere, first of all, he claims that he got that job. Now, a background that he would have to go out there and work on something like that would be a year and a half, a 2-year deal. And it turns out, I don't think anybody cares enough to go to MIT and to get the university and the archives to pull all his stuff to make it look like he didn't go there. It was him fabricating it. And so I think what happens is a lot of people will have an experience, or they'll do something, and then they add to it with this other extreme claims. And he has still never, they hold on to a couple things that he said that could be factual, or that were true, but then you talk to someone else who is also respected, and they explain to you that no, he was his position was to work on, he was an IT, or he was a printer technician that worked on different programs with our printers and our early on computers. And he really never, we still don't have anything. And don't you think that at this point, even when he took people out to see this stuff, it wasn't, if you watch the video of what they took, it's there wasn't anything that was it.
That was John Lear. That was him, John Lear, and two females, and that goes
There
straight
you
into
go.
my entire theory on this. And I don't say two females. Say, oh, it's two females. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're females. It's his wife and some other female. I don't know if it was someone related to John Lear, a friend, or what. But this is where I started looking into it, and I have massive problems. John Lear, as all of you know, and I don't give two shits what your opinion is about what he was into or what he wasn't. I don't care. I'm interested in him as well. But John Lear, if you want to talk about a true conspiracy theorist, that is John Lear. I'm assuming, had money probably from his dad when he died, and he's retired, not working. He's passed away now a few years ago, but he clearly, this was all he did. And he would have interviews with George Knapp, other people. He'd bring documents he claimed were these top secret documents. And you have to wonder, every single person, everyone out there listening, if someone's claiming they have top secret confidential documents and they've never even worked in this shit, you have to question how the hell someone's going to get their hands on that crap.
So you know what Richard Doty did to
that motherfucker, he's as trustworthy as a piece of shit out of my ass.
I know, and the thing is that that's what I'm talking when I say that they and I don't know what the term I'm going to say gaslighting and it's going to be the wrong term, but when you start showing Linda the report of the female report, when you start showing her classified documents, it turns out they're made up, and just to get people to
listen to you,
right, and to not believe anything she says and to discredit her, and then you find out, and he's still on TV talking and giving speeches and stuff, and then and so, but going back to John Lear and to George Knapp, it's like I mentioned about Skinwalker Ranch. Remember, look at all the claims that they've said. And remember what at Skinwalker Ranch, I don't want to jump into it, but the claims that so for 60 years, there was nothing. And then this guy moves in who had tried to sell a book and a story and claims that they have portals and beavers and dino beavers and Bigfoots and people chasing them.
Dino beavers. Creatures they dubbed dino beavers.
Dino beavers. All right.
And
Dragon might get offset by beavers.
Yeah, dragon. So in going out there, there's nothing. Ned's was out there, and the scientists were like, "What do you want us to study?" That like at some point, we don't mind getting paid, but we're not able to. There's nothing, and so, and people take advantage of that for I don't think that they're. I do think that a lot of them that are claiming that well, what if this is a portal? Let's shoot a rocket. I'm really disappointed in some of these scientists like. Travis, who Stephen Greenstreet did a great. And even afterwards, Brandon, he said, send me the best documents, the best evidence you have, and there's nothing. And this goes from having all these claims before. And so with Bob Lazar, what George Knapp's saying, and what David Grush says, and then he's got all these, and Lue Elizondo. Yet where is any of it? Show us, tell us, give us stuff, and it's nothing.
You're never going to see it.
Yeah, you're right.
I knew that show was going to be bullshit from like the moment I started watching it. And I was like, I'm good. I'll wait a couple seasons to see what happens.
I'll tell you, we'll get into Skinwalker as well, because that's interesting. And for me, there's reasons why I'm still interested in that. I mean, I'll be interested in it, period. It's entertaining.
We talked about that. So
Lazar, I'm just going to break it down. I'm going to go straight to the kind of theory I have. And someone I heard the other day, they were right on this as well, with some differences. But John Lear, major conspiracy theorist. It's all he did. He was, you want to call someone a conspiracy theorist, he would fit the definition. Someone who looks at theories of possible conspiracies and using it for himself, whatever, who knows. There might be a little question that maybe he was even going a little bit wacko, in the late days. And not to put him down. I mean,
it
I've seen that with numerous
unfortunately
people,
happens to people.
relatives.
Yeah.
And Elise Michelle. That's what happened with the Catholic priest was a paranoid schizophrenic, and that's why they rejected it. But go ahead, you're right. I do agree with that.
So sad.
Well, so here's what I'm thinking. Bob Lazar and John Lear are friends, and I think John Lear probably started this whole thing. I think he probably approached Bob Lazar with this because if you look at the two of them, they're opposite ends of the spectrum in a way, and I think he got with Lazar and wanted to do this probably for his own purposes. I look at it as Bob Lazar probably just eventually said, okay, and just played along with it. With doing that, I think they concocted the story, which was probably a lot of John Lear because of his knowledge on different stories in the background on the whole topic. And some easy research. I don't know how easy this would have been back then. And what I'm referring to is, say, Papoose Lake and Groom Lake. Okay, Groom Lake is where Area 51 is. Papoose Lake is where the alleged S4 is that Bob Lazar worked at. Okay. How easy was it back then to find out the names of those two lake beds? I think Groom Lake was already out there, but Papoose Lake, it's 15 miles southwest. It's right there. Was the name Papoose Lake actually on maps you and I could get our hands on? I don't know. But as we continue through the story, we see, I think John Lear concocted this with Lazar. It was probably mostly John Lear, and that's how this thing was born. At some point, years later, there was some type of alleged minor falling out between the two. I know they moved, or at least Bob Lazar, he's moved around with his company, United Nuclear, numerous times up to Michigan. Now he's back up in like Washington or something.
Stay out of my state.
Yeah, and there was some falling out. I think what that falling out might have been, and this is just a feeling, an opinion, I don't know. I think a lot of this at a certain point was probably bugging the living shit out of Bob Lazar because he's sick of it and getting bugged about it and trying to hold up a lie. I think that may have played a role in the falling out. But you also see regret from Lazar a little bit in some interviews when he talks about that. He's like, we talk from time to time.
That's a good point.
Things like that. Now, I don't know the truth. None of us know the truth on this. But when we look at it, like you said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and there's none for this. I think Lazar's story has lasting power. And, give me your opinion on this. This is just my feeling. There's so much truth or potential truth in his story, and there's so little that's actually really that far out there, even though I've heard numerous people say he's got one of the craziest stories. I don't see anything really that crazy, because here's the thing. The government easily could have built some bullshit bunkers out there in the side of the mountain. I mean, they dig tunnels and stuff. Look at Cheyenne Mountain. We have all underground, right? And they could have built these objects, put them out there, and had people like him to come out there from time to time, full well doing their background checks on this guy to see, is he a talker or not? We want the talkers. Get him out there for a period of time, fuck up his life because they don't give a shit about him, and then send you off. Boom, he talks about it. That's, a perfect way to get an adversary like Russia or China that you might be scared of attacking or doing something to think you might have quite a bit more than you're letting on. So maybe we'll hold off on the attack. That's where I see it going. I think the whole story was a setup, probably starting with John Lear. And I think Lazar was probably getting a little sick of it, and he's at the point now where he's just playing along. But now I have some bigger problems. George Knapp. So George Knapp has publicly stated when he when Lazar brought this story to him, or John Lear, however that worked, because now keep in mind, George Knapp was friends with John Lear at the time. Okay.
Right.
When he brought the story to George Knapp, George said, I knew this was a crazy story. I knew I was going to have to vet this guy, Bob Lazar, way more deeply than I normally do. This is what he said recently in the last few years. He said, I needed to make sure I vetted him even as good as I could to verify that Bob Lazar was who he said he was and that he would have been in a position to go do this job. And so that's why it took him 8 to 9 months-ish to actually get the story out. Well, it turned out the initial interview where Bob Lazar was just a black silhouette in the news van with the desert in the background, that was done at John Lear's house. That wasn't in front of Bob Lazar's house. It wasn't in front of the news station. It wasn't out in the middle of the desert somewhere else. It was at John Lear's house. So again, we're seeing John Lear being inserted into the story where there's no reason. However, that wasn't said at the time. Now, George Knapp clearly didn't. He's lying or he didn't do his job. Here's why. Bob Lazar said he studied at MIT and Caltech. That's the main reasons how he got his job at S4. Okay. George Knapp he also claimed he worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory, LANL. George Knapp was so focused on Los Alamos because he goes, Bob Lazar, and this you could tell George was telling the truth, at least on this part. He goes, Bob Lazar took me to Los Alamos. He took me on a short walk through Los Alamos in the goddamn building. That if he didn't work there. Now,
and navigated his way through the building, knew where to go.
Well, he got him in this secure facility. And George Knapp said he called Los Alamos. They said he's never worked here. He waited some time. He called Los Alamos again. He got I believe somebody else on the phone. They looked into it, said, nope, he's never worked here. However, here's my biggest fucking problem with George Knapp. They said, however, he could have worked here and not be in our records if he worked for a completely different company unrelated to us that we contract work to. He could have actually worked here because we don't keep those people on file, just those companies. It's those companies' responsibilities to keep their employees on file. We don't have them in our directories, things like that. And then sure enough, months and months later, a mysterious phone book directory from Los Alamos shows up at George Knapp's doorstep, and right there on one of the pages is Bob Lazar's name. Now, go ahead.
No, so remember what I said about the military or law enforcement or pilots or using people with credibility to convince people that something happened. And so if you go back to, and I've used this before in different situations, but high school geometry, we're never going to use it for anything, or are we? So all high school geometry does, it doesn't teach you about angles. It teaches you how to think logically. So how do you get from proving something to actually proving to a question or a statement to proving it? And it's the steps that you take. Same thing in law school is that they teach you how to think logically and how to logically lay something out. So how do we get from, say he did work at Los Alamos as a technician or whatever, how do we get from that to aliens and ships and all this other? I mean, that's a huge jump. And so because one might be true, and this is why no investigator, at least with the government, if George Knapp thinks that that's his extent of vetting him, first of all, George Knapp isn't an expert in vetting people, obviously. And another thing, George Knapp also co-authored that book on Skinwalker Ranch that was absolutely bullshit. And so we know that. And so all I wanted to add to that was that maybe Bob, maybe there's usually an ounce of truth to something, and then they take it to the extreme level. Jesse Ventura, for example, and I'll get into that, or I'll just mention my thoughts on that later. We go line for line with him on everything he says is a lie, and but he does it in a way that it's almost like he's like when you're working undercover, they teach you you have what they call backstop. So if somebody needs to check your story, if they need to make sure you're who you say you are, that you're the engineer from South America that's also interested in making money off of trafficking cocaine, then they're going to check. They're going to, or a biker gang is going to call their sources and make sure you worked at this place or said. And so the whole government has what they call a backstop to make sure that if the phone rings, they answer it with the company they're supposed to answer it with. And I know this because Dad did this half his career. And so that said, that they teach you that when you're telling your story, you never cement yourself in something. You never back yourself in a corner. You always leave yourself a way out. So tell me about yourself, Jared. Well, I played football at Colorado. Well, okay, we looked up the Colorado roster. You weren't on there. Well, it's because I was injured. There's always something you can go to when you're dealing with people that are putting a gun to your head. And so this is not much different in that they've taken an ounce of truth about something and they've gone so far overboard. And I think that, Bob, you can see the strain and almost the guilt in Bob Lazar when he talks, that he's invested in it. He's way past the point of being able to say, I'm sorry, I was just fabricating it. I hope people forgive me. We're way past that. And so some of this stuff people are just going to take to the grave. And I think that's the case here. I do think that because if you remember, John Lear went into George Knapp and threw this big packet down on his desk and said, this is all stuff that's going on, and kind of was the one who, he was trying to get something to be looked at. And sure, at Groom Lake they have buried bunkers, and they have hangars that are built in the side of mountains. Of course they do. That's also where they test. Look at what they did during the Cold War. They would take out a plane and put it. It was a model of a plane. Put it on a stand so that the shadow, when the Russian satellite went over, could see it, and then they would take that off, and then they would do the real testing. So I'm sure that stuff's going on. But how do we get from there to alien bodies and to some alien named J-Rod that is supposed to be that? They said that there's an alien there named J-Rod that this guy worked with that is supposed to be back in telling them how to fly these crafts. Well, then how come nobody knows how to fly them?
Wasn't that one of J-Lo's husband's names or something? J-Rod?
Baseball player?
Oh, that's what people call it.
That was A-Rod.
That's A-Rod.
I'm all for pointing out that people should be discredited. And this is where George Knapp comes into that story, because he said he had to vet him deeply, right? Because he knew it was such a crazy story, which I don't see it as that crazy. There's a lot of truth in it. And I think that's why it has staying power, because it's believable. We would have bunkers out in a dry lake, but all this bullshit, right? So George Knapp said he did the 9 months, and he called Los Alamos twice. And the second time they told him he could have actually worked here, but we wouldn't have him on file if he worked for a third-party contractor, that makes sense. And then he called back a third time, and they just hung up on him, allegedly. He also called MIT and Caltech.
They were like, this guy again.
We have no record. Now, keep in mind, Bob Lazar also mentioned one of his professors. So, now, on someone we're going to touch on later, Lue Elizondo, as he would call the modern-day armchair quarterbacks that are sitting in their mother's basements on their couch.
You go out and get a degree. You go out and get your clearance. Yep. You go out and do it. Be my guest.
According
you
to
do your own research.
The armchair quarterbacks nowadays, and this is one of the things. This is what I think goes to kind of something you said. At least I think, these people. You want to leave a way out. Well, George Knapp thought he had a way out, I think, and he never counted on the internet and research via the internet.
That's a good.
Never discount the fucking internet.
Here's what happened.
Never discount it.
According to Elizondo, the stupid armchair quarterbacks, which is no one any different than any of the four of us, anyone watching, anything, three of us, sorry. I'm looking at me and you two on the screen, and then I'm thinking of myself sitting here, out of body experience, paranormal, I don't know.
That's the intelligence agents.
Oh yeah, we're super intelligent agents over here.
So the armchair quarterbacks come out. They do their research that apparently George Knapp should have done but never did when Los Alamos told him he could work for a third-party contractor and we wouldn't have record of him being here. That should have been a red flag for him to say, wait, he has to work for a third-party company because he got me into Los Alamos to give me a small tour. So you would fully expect someone of George Knapp's stature to have done his research and said, well, hey, can you tell me the names of these companies so I can call them? Because this guy's not giving me anything. And do it. No, it's not until 2015 or later, somewhere around there. People do their research, and guess what they find? They find out that Bob Lazar never worked at Los Alamos. Well, he actually did. He never worked for Los Alamos. He worked for a third-party company as a computer tech and was contracted to do work at times at Los Alamos, which would fully explain how he got Lue Elizondo, George Knapp in there. He called. Yeah, they looked into MIT and Caltech. They verified no record of Bob Lazar. However, as stupid as these armchair quarterbacks allegedly are by Elizondo, they started looking at where Lazar lived at the time he would have been going to college, and they found that not only did the professor he named from MIT or Caltech actually works at a community college right by where Lazar lived at the time, they verified Lazar actually went to college there as well.
Shocker.
Pacifica or something like that. Is it a community Pacifica or something?
Yeah, I don't recall. And so this is all the work George Knapp could have done, should have done, and wouldn't have been that difficult, especially with his contacts, to do.
And that's why that's the main reason why I say that first of all I would wonder where George Knapp, when he says he vetted him, and the way he describes it as if he's vetting him for some top secret clearance, and he, you would think that in vetting him he would come up with a lot of, if the government vetted him for a background check, he would have never been cleared to go out there because, and I'm talking about like to go out to work on top secret crafts because of the things that came up in his background that they would have canceled him out on. But you would think that if he went to MIT and Caltech and these places, wouldn't you have one fellow student that would vouch for you and step up and say, wait a minute, now look, he was part of our, he lived with us, he was in, I do know this because I cheated off of him twice, and I do know that
there was one person, and I don't believe this person actually went to school there. However, someone had already come out a long time ago, and they said, because he's been interviewed, and he's like, look, I don't know if there's any legitimacy to any of this. I don't know if he actually went to MIT or Caltech. He goes, but now I don't remember which university this guy was actually referencing, but let's just call it Caltech. No, actually, where's MIT located?
Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
I was correct. Holy shit.
Caltech's in California.
I was like, Mass.
I
didn't want to say it because I thought I was going to be wrong. It looked stupid.
Right?
Cal Poly. Caltech.
Okay. Caltech. So let's go with Caltech. This guy was saying basically, I drove him there to go to school every day. I dropped him off out front, and then I went off to my job and blah, 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 blah. He goes, because he's clearly aware of what's going on now. He's like, I don't know if there's legitimacy to it or not, but I know I was taking him there every day. Like, what the hell was he doing if he wasn't going to school there? So you either got this guy in on it, or Lazar is planning this for a long time before the story ever even comes out.
That would be fucking diabolical.
Well, it's true. There's only 2, maybe 3 scenarios that explain it.
In my mind, and I hate to say this because this is going to be more diabolical. This scares me in a sense that Bob Lazar is going there. If you look at some of the things he got involved with afterwards, he's going to a college campus that he doesn't attend. And he is, I mean, what is he? I mean, here's a grown man that is not a college student there, that is going there every day. And is he macking on different girls here and there and trying to this and that? I mean, because he did that afterwards.
Yeah.
So
We
is he a
should
predator?
totally look
Is he
into
looking
see if there was any like spike in murders around the time he was there.
Yeah,
Maybe he was a super secret serial killer. Sorry.
Maybe he roofied some of those girls, and now they're out in the desert. We don't know, but I do know that
Yep.
that you would, when the government tries to discredit, they don't. The government doesn't. They don't look at John Kiriakou, so they don't try to erase your, because it's too difficult. If they actually went back and tried to erase your stuff, there's especially nowadays with all the technology. But what they do is they do it in a different way, as far as they take you to court and then they bankrupt you and they tell you that's what they're going to do. And so
Yep.
isn't it strange that they've called these people to testify about these different things that they've seen, the David Grushes and whatnot, but Bob Lazar's never been called to testify, and part of it is because nobody in a position of authority believes a fucking word he says. And I believe he was a technician at Los Alamos. I believe he spent some time there, and I believe he, John, with the help of John Lear and they embellished way. They went way overboard as far as when you start talking about aliens and these crafts, and he gives you just enough knowledge that he has. But the problem is that, number one, nobody else confirms any of this, and then we get all this other stuff.
John Lear.
Except the person who was to confirm it, and this is and so I think you're right. I think that he probably did go out there, but if George Knapp says that he vetted him just because he got him into Los Alamos,
he did a horrible job and just discredited himself as a journalist.
There you go. Not only as pretending to be somebody who is investigating someone's background, but as a journalist, he should have known. Because amateur journalists, I mean, people that you see, at least they do the research and at least they provide. If there's something factual, and you give the people a chance to make their own minds up about it. They go all in on this, and then you start adding the Jeremy Corbells and the guys who steer this in a certain direction. And again, they speak of things as if, okay, because they found a hand machine, doesn't mean that, how do we get from here to here? Unless you can show me your work, I can write the problem out and write the answer because I'm looking off the person next to me. But if we know how
to get from here to here with the hand scanner, because turns out it was in a movie.
There you go. As was the plot about him replacing somebody who was killed, who was injured, wounded, and killed out there. So,
and that's a whole nother thing, because I keep on saying psychiatrist, the physicist who was allegedly there before him. This guy tried opening up this little ball. They were somehow able to actually remove from the craft, and this was, they believe, the fuel source, power source, all this probably holding the 115 element 115, and that's a whole nother thing too. And this guy, something exploded, blah, blah, blah. But yet Bob Lazar and this other guy who was working with, allegedly, they were able to get this thing going a little bit, or doing this, doing that, and touch it. And I'm like, you didn't explode into oblivion. That's interesting. And he has claims that, and I don't even know if these are firm claims from him, rather than vague statements to lead one to believe that he may have a little bit of element 115, and everyone's always asked, well, then how the hell did you get something like that out of there? And another thing a lot of people go on with 115 is, oh my God, he's talking about 115. It wasn't even on the elemental chart at the time, and blah, blah, this. Well, all you got to do is 2 seconds of research and go out on YouTube and look at some actual scientists, people who know shit about shit, talk about this, and they go, look, we were up to like element 112 at the time. They go, we know from that,
they're predicted. Yeah.
115, we're going sequentially by numbers. We know we're going to get to 115. We know what that's going to involve, because when you go from 110 to 111, you're adding one more of this and it's doing this. And when you go from 111 to 112, you're basically, there's one more piece that's put in there. We know how to put the puzzle together. We just, don't know how to build the pieces.
It was forecasting. If I tell you there's going to be a storm come, and 3 weeks later a storm comes, and you say, "Oh shit, Jared's a psychic because he predicted a storm was coming." Well, of course a storm's coming. Of course we're going to get. I mean, this stuff keeps advancing and we keep growing, but it doesn't. Taking it from that to, again, I would say this is if that's the case, where is all this stuff? Where is all these fuel cells and all these reverse engineering? The guys that claim that they kept this one alien alive just so that he could explain to them how to operate the crafts, yet nobody ever operated the crafts, and so it's I don't want to say it's a lot of, because you can see the strain in Bob Lazar when you're having to have everybody else talk for you, and you claim it's just because of your personality when it's actually not. I mean, you have the personality to open up a brothel, but you don't have the personality to talk about things that you can tell inside hurt you and inside. And he's invested in it, as opposed to guys like Lue Elizondo knows he's full of shit. I'm sorry. I gave him a lot of leeway because of his background but then again, none of the stuff that we're talking about is tangible, is objective. There's no objective truth to any of it outside of the fact that they will give you a little bit. They'll give you a taste test and then expect you to describe all the ingredients that went into it, and then they'll take it from there and tell you where it was processed from and all this when it never. And I don't know why. Again, I wish I knew the psychology behind why people will.
Because they can.
Yeah, and the good thing about the internet, which is what you said a second ago, the good thing about the internet is it's given us so much access to. I mean, it's done way more good, in my opinion, than it has bad. However, if people think that they go on and can watch a 7-minute YouTube video and say, "Oh my gosh, well this did happen," or I watched him on Joe Rogan and he said this,
that's what all the crunchy moms are doing about vaccines. They just Google it and they obviously know everything. So why not YouTube it? I mean. Sorry, sarcasm, but like
no. I agree. I don't even want to get into the whole the Fauci and the vaccine and because
I know I wasn't even trying to scratch that.
I'm going to lose my shit over that. But you know what's funny is that when you say that and they do they who's the comedian he was on with in Vegas with Bradley Cooper, and he's the Chinese or the Oriental. He was an actual doctor who's now a comedian.
Oh, Dr. Ken. Dr. Ken.
Yeah, Ken. Yeah. So he has a great bit about how people will just Google their symptoms and rather than come to the doctor and tell the doctor what it is because they looked on a website and not with no medical and that's what happens. And people, sometimes it's to a smaller degree, but people believe this and they hear what people like Jesse Ventura says about something. And because he was a Navy SEAL, the credibility is supposed to go to here. But you find out that every single word that he says, if you know something about something, just the little things. And then you watch, like I told you, if you want to get somebody who's storytelling, if you want to throw them in a spin, you cut them off and back them up and say, okay, wait a minute, hold on, stop. Let's go back a second. Explain, and then you're going to watch them get upset. And they're going to
Stephen Greer to a T.
and Stephen Greer. And if you notice Stephen Greer, I'm not sure what, but he's got this. I think he's. I don't want to say that.
I told Stephanie this on a previous episode. You've heard people referencing like, aliens are already here. They're walking around. They're able to look like humans. If there was ever an alien from another planet here in a human's body, look at Stephen Greer's face. He's it.
And look at and he used. I watched things when he was younger. I've looked back on it now, but now when he gives an interview, like I watched him on Vlad TV, and he has a severe problem with his mouth and with his twitching, and it's almost like and that's what happens when you're on Adderall or meth or any type of amphetamines. Plus, it makes you paranoid and makes you crazy. And there's something that it just.
I'm a weirdo, but I actually needed that shit. I I don't know.
Oh no, I'm not saying no.
Yeah. When I was on
I
Adderall, I just was like, I would stare at the walls. But at the same time, I actually needed it. People who take it to abuse it, yes, definitely.
There you go. That's
abuse is the key
him.
for that. No, it's okay. Abuse is just like very key on that. People who abuse that drug, and Adderall very much it's literally legal meth. I mean, legal meth technically is deoxin, but whatever. But there is literally one chemical difference. You were talking about chemical differences in the periodic table, but yeah, there is like literally one small chemical difference between Adderall and meth. I did my whole like final project in my medical assisting school on this shit. It was wild to me, the things that I found out, like the drugs that they give people that are actually like street drugs but legal, and it's like, what the fuck? But yeah. Oh my gosh.
They put me on Adderall whenever I came back from because I couldn't. I mean, I was and for several years.
But
I had to take it, but I didn't. It absolutely did. I couldn't have focused without it. And so, but
because it helps regulate our chemical imbalances. People who already are balanced are now out of balance, which is why they get all grindy, teethy, and like, I can do everything. Like,
and that was my. So I didn't mean to come off as though it was because I was.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to clarify for the viewers.
Yeah. It's just there's something with him when he's. And maybe it's not that. Maybe it's something else that I shouldn't even be bringing up. That it could be something different. But the fact is that his claims. Do you think that for 1 minute, if he was involved in some black ops group that was going to that was planning on going to war with these alien crafts or these people and all this nonsense
Space Force
with no background in the military or the Pentagon high up as someone secretive?
People who do that, they don't go on talk shows. They don't go on and tell the world about it. They don't charge people to go watch flares come out of a Cessna in Florida. They don't, and it's just there's so many. When I look at when I watch somebody, I watch how they answer a question. I watch if they, like I don't even want to go into this, but when Rob O'Neill starts talking about killing Bin Laden and about if you listen to his original story versus his story after, he's almost telling it like he wants it to be a movie, and he adds every three sentences, he adds his own little humor into it. That's about a third grade level humor. But the problem is that when you stop him and ask him to back up, he comes unglued. And Jesse Ventura is the same way. And the problem is Jesse Ventura. There could be things, but when he starts talking about things that and he starts making statements and he takes those and tries to lead you to believe this because of this, and none of it is true, and it's not true, and he always and he doesn't do a very good job. I should pick on Jesse, but he doesn't do a good job about because his claims are just. It's for the sensationalism of television, and I don't think he believes half of it. I think that's who he's become, and I think was a conspiracy guy for a long time. But the problem is that where he messed up was going like where other people have messed up. He went in on things that I was a Navy SEAL and a demolition expert, so I know how to how to drop buildings and how they fall.
I'm a team pilot, therefore, I'm a trained observer. I know for a fact that what I saw 50 miles away, just a little glint, was not a 747. Complete bullshit. On that note, I'm going to pause you just for a second, Jared.
Yes, sir.
Stephanie does have to go. So here's what I'm thinking. If Stephanie's okay with missing out a little bit on Lue Elizondo, and if Jared is okay with continuing for a short period on Lue Elizondo, we'll let Stephanie go. And if Jared's okay with coming back on again, we'll pick it up because I want to talk more about Doty. I really want to talk about these UAP hearings with Corbell and Grush and others, as well as David Paulides, Jeremy Corbell in general, more on Stephen Greer and some new information, possible Israeli intelligence from the beginning. and Bigfoot, and possibly some paranormal. So if you're okay with staying on for a little bit, Jared, we can go into Elizondo. We'll let Stephanie go, and we'll pick that back up at another show.
Yeah. Also, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like, super excited about that. You've been an absolute wonder, and I can't wait to continue on the next show and talk about more with you. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm honored. And I'm hoping you guys will have me on as often as you want. So
absolutely, as often as you want, honestly. So I bid you guys adieu. Have a wonderful rest of the show, and it is midnight for me. I am going to go.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check back with us often for new episodes. Feel free to drop a comment, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Obscured Reality.